How did you deal with losses in jiu-jitsu?
Jiu-jitsu day today.
Losses. Assuming in a tournament, right? I just had my first tournament and got the floor wiped with me.
Yeah, welcome to jiu-jitsu.
Yeah,
and the obvious thing is you got beat. Good, you learned. I think we've gone through that one. Yeah. And then really, how did you get beat? What areas were you weak in? Then you analyze and improve in those areas, and that's jiu-jitsu, right? Yeah. Don't dwell in your loss, but learn from it and move forward. And actually, speaking of Dave Burke, I was talking to Dave Burke, and he was explaining to me his psychological current status in jiu-jitsu. So he's basically my age. I'm 46. He might be 45 or something like that. But he's been basically a master of kind of everything he's done.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, he's like factually, if you look at his life, he's been Top Gun instructor. He was telling me that during Operation Southern Watch, which was post First Gulf War, pre 9/11, he was one of the very, very, very few guys that actually dropped a live bomb. And back in the day when no one had any experience, he was a guy that had really, really done it. Yeah. And then he was Top Gun instructor. And then F-35, F-22, just all that stuff that he's done. And he was telling me that, like, if he thinks about it, he gets a little bit bummed out because he's just starting jiu-jitsu right now. And obviously it's in his head. Yeah. And he's thinking, oh, well, I'm never going to reach the highest level that I should or could if I had started younger. Yeah. And so it's almost like if he thinks about that too much, it's almost like, well, then I'm just not going to do it. Yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah. But he immediately was like, of course, I know that I'm going to do it and I'm going to be as good as I can. But that's also the way life is, right? Yeah. Just like how do you deal with losing in life? You learn from your mistakes, you move on, you don't dwell. It's the same thing as jiu-jitsu. You study your weaknesses, you figure out what you can do, you fix those problems, you move forward. You don't dwell in the past. That's it. Yeah. Got beat, good. Yeah.
I'll actually put it into perspective even more so this is just an assumption. I know. I just had my first tournament. I'm assuming white belt, maybe blue belt. Okay. I'm assuming. Yep. It just doesn't seem like at brown belt or something you're not in your first tournament. This question.
No. Or you're not in your first tournament.
Yeah, typically. But you never know. But you wouldn't have this in your mind where like, how do you deal with loss? You won't have that in your mind as a brown belt. Like it's a little bit more clear. Anyway. So unless this has like scarred you for life, I lost and I'll never compete ever again kind of thing. I think this is a good way to think of it, where how it's like, I don't know, your first girlfriend in like junior high or something dumped you. Like at the time it seems like, dang, I got dumped or whatever. And then when you're an adult, you're like, oh my gosh. Same thing in jiu-jitsu. So like when you're a white belt and you lost your first, as a white belt and you're, I don't know, a blue belt, purple belt, brown belt, black belt, whatever, and you're thinking about your first tournament, you're like, oh my gosh, who cares? It doesn't matter at all. Mm-hmm. And really, when you kind of put it into perspective, unless you want to dedicate your life to competing, the tournaments don't really mean anything. It's just fun. And if you take the fun out of it by putting everything on that one tournament that you're currently doing, bro, you won't want to do it. Yeah. And you'll kind of think that that's kind of what competing is about. And it's not. So if you lose your first tournament, my first match in my first tournament, I lost. I didn't get the floor wiped with me, but that's a common thing. Yeah. You think back on it, and not only do you, I think you'll always remember the first one, but as far as like whether you won or lost, it doesn't matter at all. Totally doesn't matter at all. And you'll find that the more you compete, the less it'll matter. And then jiu-jitsu competition, really, unless you're like really dedicating your jiu-jitsu competitions, you're gonna win some and you're gonna lose some.
You're gonna win them. You're gonna learn.
Yeah, and you learn and you learn. Oh my gosh, that doesn't work if I don't time it correctly. Or dang, that doesn't work because that's not a real submission. I only do it to smaller guys and they tap because it's uncomfortable, kind of thing. But in tournament, you learn these kind of things, But it's not even gonna matter. Like dealing with the loss, it's not even gonna be a factor because you're just gonna know that's just part of it. And really, who cares when you're kind of just starting out, Like if you ask like a top level black belt competitor, did you win? Ask Hoyler. Okay, Hoyler, right? He tells the story about him and Hoyce went into their first competition. Their dad said, if you win, I'll give you $10. If you lose, I'll give you 20. So it takes the pressure off. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Yeah. If you lose, boom, it's all good. That's what that was for. And Hoyler lost. Hoyce won, Hoyler lost. He got the $20. And he's like, sure, I would have, had the... Hoyler, one of the greatest legendary guys, lost his first one. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Puts it in perspective.
It doesn't matter at all.
You got $20.
You're not always going to get the $20, but just saying. It doesn't matter. It won't matter. And you're going to think, same thing like high school, like the stuff that happens in high school, when it happens, it seems like it's a big deal. But then when you're an adult, you're like,
it even happens as an adult.
It's cool. It's a cool memory, but, could have been better.